Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
I don't know what's harder to look at, the picture of the Pavel Datsyuk Kachina jersey that our good friend Coyote Season Tickets in Tempe, our Patreon supporter, made up. Actually, it's like a full-on Adidas, like, authentic jersey, or the conditions behind the conditional pick that Calgary sent to Montreal to take on Sean Monahan's contract. Both of them hurt my brain and my eyes, and I think I just had to put my phone away after seeing either one.
Everybody involved in both situations needs to go to jail, and I'll leave it at that.
What's that meme where it's like, bro, I'm not reading that. I'm good for you, or sorry about your luck?
Pretty much. That's
basically how I felt when I saw that book for the conditions of that trade.
I saw it was to the point where Cap Friendly, who are like the de facto leaders in this space, unless you're, someone on a general manager's staff who's like your capologist, and even more so than a lot of them, they are the leaders across the NHL in this space in deciphering trades and conditions and laying it all out for you. And it took them like hours, if not a day or so, to kind of put it all out there in a way that's digestible and where people can understand. Maybe we should do a Patreon exclusive. It'll be like 14 minutes, like 14 hours long, just breaking down all the possibilities of that trade.
Anytime news breaks or something happens in the hockey world, I try to be a responsible podcaster and get all the information, fully digest it, understand it, try to look at both sides of the situation so that, even if I disagree with something, I at least understand where it's coming from. I saw that beautiful blurb that Cap Friendly works so diligently on the conditions, and I went, and it's like, here are the conditions for that first round pick. I said, nope, and kept scrolling Twitter.
Yeah, I trust you. I trust you, bro, is essentially the answer.
Yeah, what I've come from reading other people in the timeline is it's a late first round pick. I'm just leaving it at it's a late first round pick. I don't care how they're getting there, when it happens, it's a late first.
The lawyers made their money that day. Welcome, folks, to another episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. Another remote one. That pesky little virus has popped up in my house again. I'm fine. Mel is... Actually, we're doing a lot better than last time. Last time, for those of you who have listened for a while, it kicked our butts, but just a little tired, small cold, but still taking all precautions so Evan doesn't have to miss his show later this week, and Brad's kids keep trucking along. So remote episode this time. Bear with us. Here to talk all things hockey, the NHL, the Detroit Red Wings, and international hockey with the World Juniors. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
Ryan, I just wanted on record that virus came for you because it listened to the Patreon exclusive episode, heard what your hockey style was back in the day, and just went, him. He's the softest one, infect him.
I stand by the orange and white Nike Apollo stick, man. That
was your only good take. You were absolutely right. The Nike Apollo was a fantastic stick for as bad as it was. It was great. But everything else you were describing to us was just awful.
Well, for those of you who want to know what Brad's talking about, during the off season, we go down to one episode a week on Sundays usually, but we still release a midweek Patreon exclusive episode. And the last one was Brad does a gear nerd series, and Evan and I joined him this time, and we had a lot of fun conversation about hockey equipment. So if you're a patron, that's available to you. So subscribe for that.
The equipment talk was fun and great, and obviously I loved it. But then when we started talking about hockey style, and it was truly something to hear. I'll leave it at that.
I am a tongue of the skate outside of shin pads person for the rest of my life, and I'll die on that hill.
It's not even that. You're basically wearing booty shorts over your hockey equipment with the way you...
I don't like it to restrict my knees. Anyhow, on this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we'll be having a conversation about... we're going to be taking a look at the Yzerplan and giving it a review and giving it an honest assessment of where we are now. And the context here is a survey that was put out by The Athletic based on NHL front office confidence rankings. And that's from Dom Lucian. So we'll be talking about the results from that and whether or not the public and Red Wings fans are aligned with reality and what we think. We'll be taking a look at how the Red Wings prospects did in the World Juniors that just wrapped up yesterday in remarkable fashion. One of the most entertaining hockey games, period, I have ever seen in my life, period. We'll be talking about the World Juniors overall, how different countries fared, great prospects for the Red Wings on Team USA, but they bounced out a little early. And then, of course, as we alluded to earlier, the moves Calgary made, they moved out Sean Monahan to bring in Nazem Kadri, so it wasn't in Lou's desk, or at least it never got moved out of Lou's desk after all, and we'll be talking about the fallout from that. So, for an off-season episode, quite a bit here to chat about. Of course, I do want to mention that the Winged Wheel podcast is a very, very proud supporter of the Jamie Daniels Foundation, and one way we support them is through Winged Wheel podcast nights at the LCA. The next one has been announced for October 29th, 2022. That's a game on Saturday against Minnesota. So what it is we've partnered with the Detroit Red Wings. This is our third time running this event. There's a pre-game live podcast featuring Ken Daniels and Mickey Redmond, and unfortunately also all three of us hosts of the Winged Wheel podcast. There will be a meet and greet, giveaways, merch, everything like that. Food and drinks will be available for you. We all sit in Winged Wheel podcast sections of the arena. It's very cool to see them extremely full in there. And then after the game, there's going to be a meetup, details to be determined. And Evan, I didn't forget this time, the tickets have a special Winged Wheel podcast discount, and a portion of the proceeds from every ticket sold is going to go to the Jamie Daniels Foundation. So wait for those tickets to become available. Stay tuned. Follow us on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod to find out more about when those are going to come out. All right. Red Wings fans, still extremely, extremely confident in the Yzerplan. Like I mentioned, The Athletic ran an NHL front office confidence ranking. They do a survey or a poll every year. That's from Dom Lucian. And the top 3 teams based on overall grades, we'll call it top 4 because a team is tied with Detroit. So we have Colorado and Tampa Bay first, both with an A+. That makes a ton of sense. You don't need to look much further than last playoffs to understand why. And then the next 2 teams in third and fourth respectively are the Detroit Red Wings and Carolina Hurricanes, who both landed an A grade. Now, Colorado, Tampa Bay, Detroit, Carolina. One of those is not like the other. And it spurred a little bit of conversation online in the hockey sphere in the Red Wings world as to why Detroit is up there with those, powerhouses and de facto Stanley Cup champions, or at least Stanley Cup contenders. So overall impressions, I think, before we get into the details of it, of how high Detroit came in on this ranking and whether it's warranted.
It's tough to say if it's warranted because it's so subjective. And I think when you got into the nitty gritty of the Twitter discourse, the people who are arguing against it really weren't arguing what the article was actually explaining, because this wasn't a results survey. If it was a results survey, yeah, the Red Wings would be, where did they finish last year? 25th, 24th? That's where they would be. It's a fan confidence survey. Steve Yzerman hasn't given us any reason to not be confident in the path, because if you're from an outside perspective, it's easy to look at the Red Wings and go, yeah, they've missed the playoffs for like a billion years in a row right now. Why would anybody be confident in that? Well, Yzerman has only been at the helm for 3 years. He inherited one hell of a mess that Ken Holland left him. So what I break the survey down to is, did he do the right thing survey? And in the 3 years Steve has been at the helm, he has done largely what every fan and everybody with any reason in the hockey world would have done. He's been patient. He's made shrewd trades. He's drafted very well. I mean, and when the team looked like they were at a point where they could maybe finally start to turn the corner, he went balls to the wall in free agency. It's not a results survey. It's a confidence survey. And Steve Yzerman came in with a sterling reputation from what he did with Tampa Bay and has done nothing outside of maybe drafting one or two iffy picks, and maybe the Sherratt contract wasn't great. He has not given us a reason to be not confident in his path to getting the Red Wings back to being a contender.
Yeah, I thought that was really funny how people were really upset because they're like, the Red Wings haven't done anything. And it's just such a funny conversation to have year over year. What have Red Wings fans who have looked forward even, a month at a time going back to the Ken Holland era, what were they screaming back then? What were we yelling about? What did we get chastised about when we first started this podcast because we were being too negative? It's that this team was going to be in a bad place because there was no prospects in the pipeline. They had terrible anchor contracts. They were screwed with the cap. Basically, the Red Wings were going to have their hands tied for quite some time. And that's what the Red Wings did have. Now, I have to give Ken Holland credit where credit is due. He did, far too late, but he did start to do some things to start to undo that. But it's not as if he was turning back time. It's untying this unholy knot where you don't even want to look at it. And it's going to take years and years and years. Holland lost his job pretty early in that process, so Yzerman still had a pretty deep hole to dig himself out of. So, yeah, I have to agree with you, Brad. Like, expecting Steve Yzerman to have made these Red Wings into anything substantial in the win column by now, considering the constraints of the cap, the draft, developing players, etc., and knowing where the Red Wings were after the Ken Holland era, that's an argument that's not in good faith. I'm sorry. Like, I understand, yes, results do have to come eventually, and we'll get there. I actually agree with that sentiment. But to this point, to say, yeah, the Red Wings, Yzerman should have the Red Wings in the playoffs, and what do they have to show for it? I'm sorry, but you can't look at where the Red Wings were and say, yeah, by now the Red Wings should be competing for cups or anything like that. It's not a good faith argument, and is it the same kind of success that Joe Sakic has had, that Julien Brisebois has had, that Don Waddell has had? No, of course not. But it's a different kind of success. It's a different flavor. It's all Yzerman could do. Not perfect. There have been bumps in the road, like you mentioned, Brad, and I think Steve Yzerman would be the first one to say the Yzerplan hasn't been perfect, but it's been a lot of the right moves to instill this kind of confidence in my mind.
Yeah, and I think part of the reaction, too, is the Red Wings are a very large fan base. And when you have a large fan base, a certain percentage of that fan base tends to be very vocal and not always in the most friendly of terms to other fan bases. So there has been this era of, anytime anybody criticizes anything Detroit does, this vocal minority just starts screaming, "You're an idiot, trust the Yzerplan, yada yada. The Yzerplan is infallible." And so naturally there's pushback that comes to that. It is what it is. It happens in every fan base, and it's hilarious watching the back and forth when it happens. But yeah, it's what you want to do. Because what would have happened last summer if Steve Yzerman signed even a couple long contracts, even if they were for good players? Would the Red Wings be in a better spot right now? No.
It'd be largely the same team.
They'd be largely the same team with a prospect worse than Marco Kasper. Probably a much rougher outlook on the old salary cap. And again, no further along. It's what Ken Holland was doing, which was signing mediocre free agents to try and salvage something that wasn't there. And Yzerman didn't take that approach. That's why we're confident in him, because everybody, like I said earlier, any idiot with a brain could have went and looked at this team over the last 2 years and said, "Stevie, not now. Now is not the time. We need more picks." And he did it, and it's worked very well. And then you couple that with some pretty savvy drafting and some, very, very, at the time, I'll call them strong under the radar moves. You can look at getting Nedeljkovic for nothing, Husso for a 3rd round pick, Fabry for he who shall not be named in case Kara is listening. These are all reasons that just bump up the confidence level. So yeah, it's exactly what I would have expected. Like, yeah, maybe an A is a touch on the high side because you haven't done anything yet. But again, what's outside of the Sherratt contract and maybe a couple questionable draft picks, what is there to really question about what he's done so far?
I want to first talk about the actual detailed results of the survey, because it's split into a fan base, so Red Wings fans portion, and a public portion, so everyone else in the league. Roster building, the fan base gave him an A- for the entire, Yzerman and his group, the whole front office, and the public gave him a B+. That's virtually the same. Cap management, both A- for both public and Red Wings fans. Drafting and development, A from Red Wings fans, A+ from the public. So Red Wings fans are ostensibly harder on this Red Wings team. They're looking at the Cossa pick nervously. They're looking at some of the second round picks where they passed over guys like Stankoven, which is, very loud in people's faces right now for other players. Trading, A from Red Wings fans, A- from the public. Free agency, A- from the Wings, B+ from the public. Vision, A- from Red Wings fans, A from the public. So overall, it averages out to the fan base gives him the second highest confidence in the league, and the public gives him fourth highest. It's even across the board, even outside of the Red Wings fan base, the confidence is there. Now, let's talk about, we talked about those bumps in the roads and what might go wrong or what might affect this legacy or what the results would be down the line. The Ben Sherratt contract is right there. That's one that we've talked about ad nauseum. The simple solution there is Yzerman gave term to a guy who he sees as solidifying the blue line. But analytics and some folks who watch his game, it really doesn't speak friendly to how he plays right now and how he might age in that contract. And I think that's fair criticism. Like, that's going to be one that people are going to have their eyes on. And like it or not, the Cossa pick right now, a lot is hinging on that Cossa pick. Using assets to trade up further into the first round with that pick and then drafting a goalie, he has to land. That is part of the result. For the Red Wings to be good in the future and for this rebuild to go well, Cossa has to land as a player.
Yeah, when you go into a full-scale rebuild, I think drafting and cap management are the two things of utmost importance. Now, Sherratt contract aside, he is still overall masterfully handled the Red Wings cap situation. Even with that contract, there is still absolutely zero concerns about the Red Wings cap situation in the near future or in the distant future. It's phenomenal right now, and they have all the flexibility in the world. But that's the secondary. You rebuild to get draft picks and prospects. If you miss on a lot of draft picks, it was all for naught. Look at the Sabres and the Oilers for a long time there. The main reason they never got better is a lot of their picks, important picks, did not pan out. Now, Yzerman's first two first-round picks was Seider and Raymond. Great start. Edvinsson looks like he's going to be a player. Cossa, again, huge question mark, but we said that going into that draft about goaltending. We say that about every draft going into every draft about goaltending it's always a huge question mark. Yeah, he's made some less than, I'll call it, ideal picks outside of the first round relative to what the consensus thought or relative to even what we thought. But outside of the first round, such a crapshoot. I don't think anybody really holds that against any GM too much as long as you get one or two every few years. And it looks like he's on pace to do that. So, yeah, I mean, the important things in a rebuild, to sum it up simply, so far, so good.
Yeah, and when you look at the Red Wings before and now, they have a tangible thing that they can see that excites them. And obviously that would give the fans confidence in their front office, right? Moritz Seider wins a Calder. Lucas Raymond looks like the real deal. Outside of winning the cup or being in the finals, that's a very tangible thing that a lot of the other middling teams may not have the confidence about.
Talking about things where it maybe isn't as was seen as ideal by the fans or the public. Brad, you mentioned in that whole list, drafting a lot of the second, third, fourth round picks. We've learned very quickly what it's like to actually mock up a draft and how the draft goes when there are 32 teams involved. So it's not that the Red Wings didn't select, our favorite prospect or anything like that, but much like many other teams on the board, they don't always take the most ideal second round pick. They don't always take the most ideal third round pick. The thing is, I think what has happened is Steve Yzerman and his whole front office have bought themselves a mile of leeway with two essentially grand slam picks in Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond. You called them fantastic, or I can't remember the word you used, Brad. That's probably understating it by orders of magnitude. To get a Calder winner at 6th overall when that was seen as a heinous overreach by some people, but at the very least, and I know we thought like, we really wanted Trevor Zegras, to land that kind of player in the face of all other judgment and opinion saying that's not what you would get out of him. That's a grand slam. To get a Calder caliber player in most other draft classes in Lucas Raymond at 4th overall in his draft class, I'm sorry, but that's close to a grand slam too. So if Simon Edvinsson and Marco Kasper turn out to be just really great, to stick to baseball terms, they hit a triple there, and they don't hit on as many second or third round picks as maybe they really should on average, and they pass by the Stankovins and whoever else in more recent draft years, that leeway is there. So it's not perfect. You don't want to say, oh, okay, they did one thing really well, so now they can suck in all these other ways. No, you want the team to draft well in the first round and the second and third and fourth round. But there's quite a bit here that the Red Wings can lean on moving forward and know that they're still advantageous. Like Evan said, there's something for them to look forward to, and there's a true foundation. The move, though, this offseason to really add in free agency, it's not a mystery as to why Steve Yzerman did it. He wanted to solidify his core. He wanted to support Moritz Seider's development in adding, Mata and Sherratt, and that's for Hronek as well. He wanted to make sure there wasn't only one line of forwards to produce on the Red Wings. But that does move the Red Wings, or it should, out of draft lottery range, barring something absolutely insane happening, which isn't impossible. And they're probably still not good enough to be a bona fide playoff contender, even in a wildcard spot. Like, a lot would have to go their way for them to land in a wildcard spot. I think this moves Steve Yzerman and the rebuild and the Yzerplan, so to speak, into results have to come soon territory.
You don't make that kind of splash in free agency and expect to regress. Now, again, we've talked about progression looking like a lot of different things this year, but it has to be there. Like, it has to, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Again, if that's, you don't move up in the standings, but you get a bunch more points, you're not getting blown out anymore. The team very obviously looks improved, but so did a bunch of other teams around you. Okay, that's probably the worst case acceptable scenario for this year. But yeah, you expect them to at least be playing meaningful games late February, early March this year, which they haven't done in a really long time. You expect them to not get smacked 11-1, 9-1 by Arizona. Like, this is next summer. This survey could look a lot different if things go off the rails this year, because Yzerman's now got a core on this team that's largely his. A few of his draft picks are now going to be regulars on this team. It's his coach, which is a huge thing this year as well, because he inherited Blashill and he gave him an honest run. He didn't jump to conclusions. He's like, let's see what we got before I, just bring in my guy. And now he has his guy. There's not a lot of wiggle room. All the dead contracts he inherited, Franz Nielsen, Justin Abdelkader, Darren Helm, Danny DeKeyser, gone. This is his team. This is probably the first year we can truly say this is a Steve Yzerman built team. And it is a season in which there is loads of room for improvement. So there damn well better be some improvement.
Yeah, the measure can't be this team has to make the playoffs. But if the Red Wings did all that, used all that cap, signed those contracts, and are in just the same boat, getting blown out, embarrassed, whatever, then yeah, that's going to move the needle backwards for a lot of people. We don't anticipate that happening. You don't bring in Andrew Copp, David Perron, Oli Mata, and Ben Sherratt and get worse if you were last year's Red Wings. So it shouldn't go that way. And yeah, I think you're right, Brad, especially with the coach, Derek Lalonde. Yeah, he is the coach, so he's the one having an impact on the roster and not necessarily Steve Yzerman night in and night out, but that is Yzerman's coach. He went out and brought a guy that he knew from the Tampa Bay system. He didn't want to fire Jeff Blashill. We know that. He held on for as long as he could, and I think he would have preferred to have not done it this summer, but Derek Lalonde is his guy, so That's all. I don't want to say it's a stretch to find, constructive criticism or pointing out the things that haven't been happy-go-lucky Moritz Seider Grand Slams so far, but it's pretty sparing. Like, what else are you going to point to? The Alec Regula trade? Initially the Nick Leddy trade, but then look how he turned that back around. Overpaying on contracts where you can see the justification behind it. Most trades being at least very good. Like, it is not a wonder why people are still very excited about it. Can Yzerman do wrong? Yes. Has he done wrong? Yeah. Look at his time in Tampa Bay. It wouldn't take you much, very long to find picks or trades or signings that weren't ideal. But, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, no rebuild is perfect. Absolutely no rebuild is perfect. There will be bumps in the road. It's not a straight line up. So I think the fan survey, I really like this exercise. You should go read. I'll link the article in the description. You should go read it. It's really cool to see. And I think this fan survey and this public opinion survey is a good and accurate representation of where the Yzerplan is right now. I don't think it's overblown. I think it's pretty fair. Bit generous to Yzerman, sure, but I don't think it's overblown at all. Before we move on here, I want to take a minute to let everyone know that this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast is proudly brought to you by a new sponsor, NordVPN. Are you missing out on a game or your favorite show because it's not available in your region? Let me introduce you to NordVPN. Using NordVPN in a click of a button, you can watch and browse as if you're elsewhere in the world, making sure you never miss a game and can watch whatever content you'd like. No need to travel across the continent or oceans for your favorite team when NordVPN brings them right to you. With over 5,000 server options, no game or show is out of your reach. Using this link, nordvpn.com/wingedwheel, you can receive a huge discount on NordVPN's cybersecurity 2-year plan plus 4 free months. We, of course, all love to binge, but privacy is a big deal too. NordVPN keeps your info encrypted so you never have to worry about your IP or location getting out. They've also doubled down on keeping you safe with their new threat protection feature. Say goodbye to intrusive website ads and malware. Even if you downloaded an infected file, threat protection kicks in and deletes it before it makes a mess of your computer. Don't forget, there's literally no risk to you with their 30-day money-back guarantee. Give it a try, and if you like it, great. If you don't, they'll issue a refund and you can pretend the entire thing never happened. Check out our special link, nordvpn.com/wingedwheel, to get your subscription started today. All right. Why don't we have a chat about the Red Wings prospects who are at the World Juniors and abroad, because Liam Dower-Nielsen could not stop scoring in his preseason. But let's start talking about the Red Wings prospects and the now wrapped up World Juniors. And why don't we start with the Swedes, because I think this is going to be one of the most interesting conversations, as much as you can draw from this tournament.
You did this to me on purpose.
I did. Yeah, I did do this to you on purpose.
I've got so many reasons to be optimistic and so many reasons to be happy outside of, based on what Red Wings prospects did in this tournament. Team Sweden isn't one of them. Obviously,
just a weird team. Like, all tournament is so weird.
They underperformed entirely. Like, the Wallstedt was about the only Swede who showed up and played well regularly. Not that they played poorly, but played to their potential for most of the tournament. I'll start with the one that's on everybody's mind, Simon Edvinsson, obviously. Now, the best thing I can say about Simon Edvinsson to start here is he has legitimate excuses, because he did not have a good tournament. I would say plainly he was bad for a lot of the tournament, but he did suffer a shoulder injury right before the tournament, and he did suffer food poisoning during the tournament. So there's not a lot of people on the planet who will play to their best when dealing with that. So it's very understandable that Simon Edvinsson did not have a great tournament, but the fact remains he did not have a great tournament. He was very turnover prone, which was a problem of his going into his draft that he seemed to have worked out last year. So it was a bit concerning to see that creep back into his game. He was not playing with any pace, which again was a concern going into his draft year that he had seemed to work out last year. So those two problems creeping back up are admittedly concerning to me. Again, it's an August tournament playing with sick and injured. So I'm still going to bet that it all chalks up to that. But again, you were hoping for a huge tournament for Edvinsson. I saw a lot of predictions from people before the tournament. He was the favorite to win defenseman of the tournament. He might even win MVP. He should dominate this tournament. It didn't happen for whatever reason. Well,
I remember when I got food poisoning, I had exits out of both ends for like 4 days. So the fact that he even attempted to play in competitive hockey is astounding. So I caught a lot of Simon Edvinsson, and he did look very shaky at best. I don't think it's like a massive cause for concern. Apparently Twitter was a war zone, so I've been told.
I like how you get reports on what happens on Twitter. You don't actually go in yourself. It's summer. You're not touching it.
Yeah, my correspondents on the ground were telling me that it's a battle, so I stayed well away from that. But I think everybody just needs to take a step back off the ledge and like just it's a one-time tournament. Wasn't what you thought Edvinsson would be. I think everything will be okay.
Yeah, I can't get over the fact that it was just kind of a perfect confluence of terrible things for Edvinsson. Like I don't want to say mismanaged or miscoached, but that whole Swedish team looked off. So the default there is, how are they being coached? What's the game plan? Was the supporting cast also going through their stuff? Anyhow, Sweden was off overall. Simon Edvinsson was one of, if not the most important player on Sweden coming in. You guys have both outlined. He didn't have a great tournament. The food poisoning and the shoulder injury, like those three things, it's unsurprising, but yeah, disappointing. So I agree with you, Evan. I don't think it's cause for concern. I think we saw enough from Simon Edvinsson leading up to this, and even small moments in the tournament where you're like, yeah, those are the skills and aspects to his game that make him effective and that make him a promising prospect. Did it come in and say, oh, this guy is going to absolutely make the Red Wings roster, and this moves the needle into, get out of the way, whatever number third pairing left-handed guy that was going to be in his way, Jordan Osterley? No, he's still going to have to earn that in camp. There's nothing really that went in his direction for this. So quite honest assessment of Edvinsson. Was it good? No. Who would be the first to tell you that? Edvinsson. He was the one saying it. Having to miss a game but still play the amount of minutes that he did, sick, injured, and off his game, like, disappointing, but I'm not sounding the alarms yet. You'll forget it pretty quickly if and when Simon Edvinsson does really well, either at camp or, in Detroit or Grand Rapids. So not what you wanted to see, but just the natural course of a prospect's progression. Not everyone's going to be Moritz Seider dominating every single ice pad that they're playing on.
Dominating. Well, let's talk about William Wallinder, because he also did not do that.
I was going to say, where's that going?
No, Wallinder was, with a capital F, fine. I didn't notice him a lot, honestly, other than the times I was actually looking for him. So take the good with the bad with that. It means he wasn't as dynamic offensively as he can be and has been in the past. But he also wasn't a liability defensively like he has been in the past. So, Wallinder had a really quiet tournament, so I'll take that as a neutral. Yep, he did better than expected in one zone, little less than expected in the other zone. Call it a wash. Niederbach was probably the most noticeable Swede of the Red Wings prospects in positive ways, but he still didn't do a whole hell of a lot other than get thrown out of a game. All the concerns and all the strengths with Niederbach were really on display this tournament. You can tell he's just gets it out there. He's smart. He sees the ice well. He knows where to go. Very cerebral player. And you could tell that because he was on Sweden's first power play unit. He was playing a prominent role. He was their shutdown center against Finland's top line in the semifinal game. And hey, Sweden only lost 1-0, so they did not give up much. I think he shut that top line down completely, actually, which was good. But man, he's slow. He doesn't play fast. He can't skate fast. At this level, he can get away and excel at what he does with what he's good at. But I still have a really hard time seeing that translate up levels as it is right now without something improving beyond what we think it will.
That's funny because I actually, not that you said anything, Brad, that is necessarily disagreeable there, but I was, I think, a lot higher on Niederbach. I think he was just buried for me in the whole Swedish mess that was this tournament, but I thought he played a much more improved, complete game. Like you said, he's smart. He thinks the game so well. His hockey IQ is on display, and I think he's translated that into bigger roles and more actual production and overall effectiveness all over the ice. I understand the pace thing. I'm still... I don't know if I can... I'm going to say I have a hard time seeing him at the NHL level. I've seen players have terrible pace of play or terrible skating, or they're not necessarily quick, but if they're smart enough, they can usually think their way out of that, where it's just that they play a different style of game. So I don't know. Niederbach was a silver lining for me with Team Sweden. Getting on to another disappointing storyline, and not in the same way, Carter Mazur and Red Savage with United States. They both had great tournaments. Carter Mazur was on display and has been on fire since the moment he was drafted. It's just a shame that they got bounced in the quarters.
Yep. Latvia beats Czechia. Czechia beats the States. Therefore, the States are worse than Latvia. Anyways.
That's how the transitive property works.
Yeah, that's exactly how that works. No, seriously though. Yeah, Mazur was arguably the State's best player this tournament. He led the team in goals. He was named one of their 3 best players when their tournament ended. He did exactly what he's good at, which is get to the net, find the puck. When you get there, put it in the net. He plays an extraordinarily simple game, but he is so effective at it. And when you put him with super skilled players, like I can't remember his line. He was playing with Bordelot and I forget who was on the other side with him. But you put him with skilled players, much like Tyler Bertuzzi on Larkin's line. He knows where to go. He can do the dirty things. And when it's time to be in the right place to, finish a play, score a goal, whatever, he's there. He gets it. He's a very, very smart hockey player. He's got that sandpaper to him, and he's got just enough skill to be able to keep up with the big boys. So he had a phenomenal tournament. Of all the Red Wings prospects in this tournament, he had the best tournament. Full stop, end of statement. Nobody else was in his category. And then Red Savage, who again, I don't think many people expected him to make this team. And he did, and he chipped in a bit of offense, and he looked strong in his role, and he was noticeable for a lot of good reasons. Had a great tournament. So yeah, despite the Americans as a whole falling way short of where they should have, I mean, 2 of the bright spots on that team were the Red Wings. So, take the victories where you can get them, I guess.
And then I don't know if he's necessarily flying under the radar anymore, but Emil Viro in Finland. This was just another display of Red Wings fans should be taking him more seriously as a potential future Red Wing than they have in the past, right? Like, he looked good. I think he has a good shot at this team.
Yeah, he's not flashy, but he's effective. He's smart. Again, it's hard to notice him because he's not an elite skater, doesn't have elite hands, doesn't have an elite shot, isn't like that mean physical defender that you notice. He's just effective. And it's hard to describe how or why he's effective without actually having the game tape in front of you breaking down plays. But yeah, it's what he is. Is he going to need to improve on some things to get to the NHL? Of course, they all do. Because when you're not above average at a few things at this age group, it's hard to get to the NHL no matter how smart and effective you are, because again, the players just get bigger, faster, stronger, smarter. But yeah, he's definitely should still be on everybody's radar. Not that he'll ever be a top 4 defenseman in Detroit. He doesn't have that potential, at least not now, unless something dramatic changes. But yeah, he's good. Like, he's so boring to describe because it's like, yeah, he's good and effective. That's it.
And then over to the winning Team Canada. I don't think there's much to be said about Jan Bednash and Czechia, really. But over to the winning Team Canada in Sebastian Cossa and Donovan Sebrango.
Well, Sebastian Cossa came up clutch in the gold medal game, didn't allow a single goal.
I knew that was coming.
great performance. Hey, he won his only game against Latvia, who turned out to not be pushovers in this tournament. So maybe it was a more significant win than we gave him credit for. But yeah, there's nothing to say about Sebastian Cossa. He was the backup goalie. Donovan Sebrango, though. I know I've been kind of beating the drum for this guy since the moment he was drafted. And this tournament was kind of my, do you see what I'm seeing now? Like, I know a lot of people who watch Grand Rapids seen it and get it, but he's good. He's like Viro, not flashy in any way. But unlike Viro, there's two ways I do find Sebrango stands out. One, in his physical game. He does play a very physical game effectively. He uses his body well, despite only being, I think he's like 6'1", something like that. And again, like Viro, super smart defensively. I mean, he was an assistant captain and led Team Canada in ice time in most of their games in this tournament. Like, if you just want to know what Team Canada thinks of him, he was one of their most important players, and they won the gold medal. And unlike Viro, the one trait I would say where I rank Sebrango at least above average relative to his peers in this demographic is his passing. He is a phenomenal passer, especially exiting the zone. He's very patient with it. He, like a quarterback, scans what's happening ahead of him really quickly and really effectively. And he's able to, if the play is there, whether it's simple or difficult, make it. And more often than not, whatever the best play is there, he will make it. But what a lot of defensemen at this age lack, and I'll chalk this up to him having 2 years in the AHL, is when there's nothing there, not running himself into trouble. Because that was one of Edvinsson's problems this tournament, is when he had the puck, wherever it was on the ice, O zone, D zone, he'd scan the ice, see nothing, and then try to force something rather than regrouping it or holding it or whatever. And that led to a lot of giveaways. Sebrango didn't do that. He would, when he had something, he made the play. When he didn't, he would regroup, reset, just simple DDD pass, whatever, until something opened up, and very rarely ran himself into trouble. Did he have a perfect tournament? No, of course not. But he was, again, for most of the Red Wings prospects in this tournament, largely disappointing in some degree. Sebrango was not one of them. He was one of their standouts for sure.
One thing I sort of noticed while I was watching is Sebrango really allows his D partner to activate and do their thing. Like, Olden Zellweger was unbelievable, and I think a part of that is only because he had Sebrango as his D partner to sort of keep everything solidified, and he can go play Rover and have 11 points and be plus 14. Like, I think that's a huge piece that will be important in the Red Wings in the future. So, yeah, I thought he had a pretty strong tournament.
And what you talked about with Sebrango, you know, having good decision-making, Brad, and that coming probably from the AHL, that also really bodes well for, in my mind, players like Edvinsson. And not that it's a novel concept, but, you know, you made the comparison where Edvinsson would try to force something. I think a lot of that was, you know, Sweden seemed out of sorts, and probably a lot was being forced through him when he wasn't at 100%, playing 21 or 22 plus minutes a night when he did play. But regardless, the turnovers, if and when they happened, or the bad decision-making was still on him. And those pro reps, whether it be the AHL or the NHL, that is something that is coachable out of a game. Getting a guy to calm down, trust his abilities, and understand that you are not going to set up, you know, a highlight reel play every single time you're on the ice. You just have to make the right decision. And often it looks boring and it seems boring. I know that's not necessarily Edvinsson's style, but it's good. Sometimes boring is good.
I mean, Mo Seider's going to need his boring D partner for the next 20 years. Not that it's going to be Sebrango, but yeah, there is a place. Ben Sherratt just got a ton of money for being that guy. Quite literally. That's why they paid him. And yeah, it's hell. You know who might be a good compliment to Donovan Sebrango in a few years? Edvinsson. So it's you need every type, and you know, Sebrango knows his role, and sure, he's got things to work on. He didn't have a perfect tournament. He definitely could stand to get a little quicker, a little stronger, but yeah, it was for the role he was tasked with on Team Canada. It's hard to pick apart. I mean, when that gold medal game went to overtime, and Bedard and McTavish jumped over the boards, in the 3-on-3, who jumped over with them? It was Sebrango. So even in the biggest moment, he was still one of the go-to guys, him and Zellweger.
Well, that's the Red Wings at the World Juniors. I think there's a lot of really good discussion to come, especially on players like Edvinsson and Cossa. Edvinsson, obviously, the big question mark is he going to make the team this year? How is he going to recover in time for training camp, etc.? Players are allowed to have bad stretches of a couple weeks, especially playing August hockey. August hockey is so ridiculous. Like, just watching that, I was like, it just feels so weird. I know we've talked about that a lot. And then on Cossa, it's going to be a continued discussion of, where does he play next? And how's the justification of drafting him where they did in the middle of the first round going to pan out? Because he has some pretty important years ahead of him. I know a lot of people had a hard time watching Jesper Wallstedt do as well as he did for Team Sweden. And, Cossa was the backup goalie for Canada. So it by no means does that decide anything, or can you draw any meaningful conclusions? I can think of a billion, phenomenal world junior performers who had no NHL career to speak of after, but, those are going to be kind of where people are dialing in and focusing. So thank goodness for the Carter Mazurs and the Donovan Sebrangos to draw the positivity out of this. Let's talk about that gold medal game and how the tournament ended up. So obviously, the States got bounced by Czechia, and then the semifinals, or in the finals, that ended up being Canada against Finland, and then Sweden against Czechia for the bronze medal game. Sweden took home bronze, but that gold medal game between Canada and Finland, and that sequence in overtime, is one of the most insane things I've ever seen in the sport of hockey. Mason McTavish, doesn't matter that the play was there because of him. That is one of the most legendary plays I have ever seen in my entire life. He could never have any success in the NHL, and he will still never probably have to pay for a drink in Canada for the rest of his life just because of that goal line save. Amazing. That
was the craziest minute of hockey history, in hockey history. Like, watching that live, I was positive that puck was in the net, and I was just waiting for the horn to blow the play dead. Just because, it was on his backhand. It wasn't slow. I know it was a redirection. That puck was not fluttering to the net. That had some mustard behind it from the Finnish player's momentum taking him to the net. And he picks it out of the backhand. It drops on the line. He's trying to fish it out of the net. Bedard's trying to fish it out of the net. The Finnish player's trying to put it in the net. There's 3 sticks kicking around it. And it didn't end up in the net. Like, the odds of that are astronomical. You could replay that from the point it hits the Finnish player's skate to going over Garand's back. It goes in the net the next 99 times. Like, there's no way that plays out exactly as it did again, one way or another, whether McTavish just doesn't pick it out of the air or one of the 3 sticks in the crease just tips it into the net and across the goal line. And then you have that crazy sequence less than a minute later, turnover in the neutral zone, 2-on-1. Stankoven goes for the toe drag of a lifetime. Finnish defenseman makes a great play on it. So Stankoven, the other Finnish defender, overcommits. Stankoven turns it into a beautiful behind the back pass. Johnson pulls it across too, expecting the goalie to not overslide and slide it 5-hole on him, but the goalie overslides, so he feeds it right into the middle of his pad for like a insane save. And then just before he overskates it, manages to corral the puck back and rip it into the empty net for only the second ever overtime goal, gold medal goal for Team Canada at the World Juniors, joining Matt Halischuk of all people in 2008. Like, it was mental. This is the craziest damn game I've ever seen live in a long, long time. Like, what game truly rivals that in terms of what the hell just happened? Like, the 2010 gold medal game, because with the U.S. tying it like in the last minute in Canada, and then Crosby's golden goal, obviously that's up there. Summit Series with all the crazy political implications, but at no part in the Summit Series was there a sequence like that. Like, just
like, you're going back to Miracle. Like, in terms of individual sequence, can forget the whole storyline, because obviously Miracle is one of the biggest.
You got the 1980 Olympic team, the Summit Series. Like, nothing storyline wise will ever top that stuff.
But just dropping that puck down, like, that That's the stuff hockey players dream of. Like when you're doing your daydreaming in the shower of you doing everything perfectly and saving your team's game. I think the only thing that Mason McTavish would have drawn up differently when he was fantasizing about that is the play wasn't happening because of his mistake, right? But other than that, I mean, it turned out well. I'm sure he's not upset about it now. And then, yeah, Kent Johnson's finish, and it was just an insane end to a very, very strange tournament. And I don't know. I was not expecting that level of mayhem in the best way to cap off that tournament. The last time I felt like that watching hockey was the sequence, the shift with Detroit. Last year it was the game that was on ESPN with like the 10 blocks and the 4 broken sticks, and they couldn't clear the zone, and that was good quality hockey. So for a weird tournament, one hell of an ending. And even though the Red Wings prospects didn't have the best of storylines, it was still a cool, really, really good display of hockey, at least at the very end.
I've got one crazy stat, too, about the gold medal game that Evan, a stats miner, will definitely appreciate. That I would love to know what the actual odds of this are. I don't know if you guys heard this stat, but of the last 21 World Junior gold medal games, 19 of them have featured Canada or Finland. This was the first one that featured Canada and Finland.
Huh. There's probably something in there to do with seeding, and, you know, usually if Canada's out, it's because Finland has upset them or something like that, and they're the ones who benefit.
Doesn't Sweden always finish first in their group? Canada usually finishes first, so that's probably why. That's
interesting. Huh. Speaking of Sweden, Liam Dower-Nilsson over in Sweden in the preseason over there at the SHL. It's just preseason, but the guy can't stop scoring. And he really, really looks promising. So you have to hope that his game translates into, well, it does seem to be translating into a much bigger role so far for him, but it's been cool to see him light it up. Should it be enough to overreact and say, yeah, this guy is going to be an absolute slam dunk pick who was drafted in the 5th round? What was he, like 135th, 134th overall? No. Will we anyways? Yeah, why not? It's fun. But talking about the Red Wings' potential center pipeline, you want to see Liam Dower-Nilsson have a fantastic season in the SHL, and by God, he looks like he's off to a good start. So that's been cool.
Yeah, if you like Theodor Niederbach, but without the devastating knee injury, let me introduce you to Liam Dover-Nilsson.
Dover-Nilsson. I always forget that. I got to get used to it.
So I'm going to get 90% of European names wrong, so the 10% that I've been corrected on, I might as well try.
Shout out to Lars for that one. Okay. The Nazem Kadri blockade is over. He signs with not the New York Islanders, but the Calgary Flames, who are just saying, F it, we are not going down. They signed him to a 7-year, $7 million per year contract. Kadri is going to be 32 to start the season. So he is signed for 7 years over there. And whoa, that is one hell of a move for them to lose Gaudreau and Tkachuk, but to bounce back by adding Kadri, by adding Huberdeau, by adding Uyghur. Is it a 1-for-1 replacement? No. Are they the same ages? Does this affect their future outlook in an entirely positive way? Probably not. But Brad Treliving is not looking 3-4 years down the road. Brad Treliving needs to keep his job and make sure the Calgary Flames keep their window open at all costs. And it is coming seemingly at all costs, but he's doing it. And I have to say, this is entertaining as hell.
I love it. What I had a moment of realization after the Kadri contract was signed is I realized what maturing in hockey media means now. It means looking at a contract and your initial thought being, oh my God, that's awful. And then realizing it's only a 3-4 year window. So the last 3 years of that, they're going to probably be in a rebuild. So who cares? It's fun. It's okay then. Like, look at the average age of Calgary as a team. Look at the ages, Huberdeau's age, Lindholm's age, Uyghur's age, Markstrom's age. Calgary's got 3 to 4 years. And then they're going to have to tear it down unless they pull off the rebuild on the fly that, you know, every team says they can do, but nobody has successfully done. So, yeah, if you got to overpay for a few extra years when you're going to likely be in a rebuild by that point? Sure, why not? Kadri's a hell of a player right now. Huberdeau's a hell of a player right now. Weir's a hell of a player right now. And let's call a spade a spade. The Western Conference sucks. Like, how many teams of the contenders in the Western Conference improved this offseason? Edmonton, probably. That's it. I'd say St. Louis, Minnesota, Colorado, Vegas all went backwards. So, Calgary's realizing their window to strike is right now. YOLO. And they're all in, and I respect the hell out of it.
Now, not only did they have to give Nazem Kadri $7 million a year for the next 7 years, but they also had to pay, again, there are these crazy trade conditions on this, but they had to pay
a late first round pick.
A late first round pick, whether it's theirs, whether it's Florida's, what year, don't ask me about that right now, but it is on average a late first round pick to move the last year of Sean Monahan's contract, which is $6.375 million. So we knew Monahan had to go. I will say this is one of the first times where people have kind of said, it really sucks that Detroit didn't do this. And it's like, yeah, you want your favorite team to do every move that is beneficial and good. And they can't always draft the best player in that round, or they can't hit every time. This is one, seeing Monahan go to a divisional opponent and looking at the Red Wings roster and their cap space, where I said, I would have loved to have had that pick in Detroit. And it is disappointing to me that Yzerman didn't pull that off. You never know who's talking to who and what the relationships are and how far the conversations went down with each one. But I mean, that's not really for fans to worry about, right? I think it's a fair statement to say this would have been a cool one for Detroit to pull off, because a late first round pick isn't nothing.
Sean Monahan has a no trade clause of some sort, right?
A limited no move. Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
guess shouldn't have state income tax.
Yeah, that could be it. Could have been on Detroit's list. So it's easier said than done, I think. That's also the other side to it, is you could be disappointed, but it might.
Yeah, I wish my GM made every good move that all the other GMs do as well.
Simply sign good players. Simply trade for good players. That's what Brad Treliving's doing.
Thank you.
He is just simply doing it. That Kadri contract, though, is like you said, Brad, it is screw 3 years from now. If we're worrying about this 3 years from now, then, what's the point? I want to win a cup now. I have to say, I think this is the right move from Calgary. It's not without pain. It's not black and white, but it's better than taking it laying down. So good for them. Like, genuinely good for them.
I mean, the salary cap has turned the NHL into a very cyclical league. When you're at the top of your cycle, you can't waste it. You absolutely cannot. And I think for a lot of teams and in a lot of situations, this is going to be an unfortunate reality of something they're going to have to do. If they're a piece or two away, or they're trying to, go from a second tier team to a top tier team, it's going to be like, yeah, this is going to suck in 3 to 5 years, but we don't have the time to be able to worry about that now. So just do it, and we'll deal with that later.
Calgary makes the playoffs. Calgary makes the finals once or twice out of that. I don't think they really care at all. They win. They definitely do not care.
If you win the cup on the backs of good players on bad contracts, I'm sorry, based on the fact that there are 32 teams in this league and how hard it is to win the Stanley Cup, it takes exactly one Stanley Cup to make that contract worth it. Like,
it's a price you pay.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Los Angeles. Like, they had, some of the contracts were signed after, but I mean, still luxury contracts they had to sign. Look how much Doughty, Kopitar, Dustin Brown, Jonathan Quick were all making, and they all turned into bad contracts with the exception of maybe Kopitar. But they got 2 cups out of it. They smartly rebuilt when they needed to, and they were able to work around those contracts, and they made it back to the playoffs already. So you can absolutely navigate this if you do it properly. And, the Blackhawks are a blueprint of how to not come out of it on the other side. The LA Kings are the blueprint for how to properly come out of it on the other side. So it can be done, and it can be done strategically. It's all about timing. You have to time this right, and you need to strike while the iron's hot. And for the Flames, no pun intended, that's right now.
This is a big L for Lou Lamoriello, because weren't all the reports, well, I shouldn't say reports, all the murmurs were that Kadri had signed in Long Island, and then all of a sudden we hear now he's in Calgary 7x7 for the same value that the Islanders were apparently reporting and offering. Just another bit of a fumble by a former GM of the year.
Ryan, I'll need you to take this one, because if I start getting into the things that Lou Lamoriello does to run his hockey team, I'll rant for an hour and a half. So,
Brad, your facial hair is too long to be part of the Islanders organization.
But it actually is.
All right, so before things get too hairy in this Lou Lamoriello conversation, and that is the fourth time I've had to make that pun, thanks to edits, so Brad might actually kill me right now. Let's jump into overtime, which on this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast is, of course, brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/WingedWheel if you want to get access to all the great features of being in the Dub Club, overtime comments, the very fun Discord, the midweek Patreon exclusive episodes that happen in the off season where we have our hockey equipment conversations, redrafts, a lot of really fun, a little bit more evergreen topics that are a step away from the day-to-day news and kind of interesting to discuss and often debate about, as it is with hockey gear and Brad. So patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast, all the support means the world to us. Let's start with a comment from Crangus McBasketball. This is an interesting one. It says, would you rather the Wings win 3 consecutive cups than go at least 25 years without one? They can still play in the playoffs after the run, or win 1 cup every 8 years for the next 24 years.
Oh, I'd much rather spread them out. Much rather spread them out.
My initial reaction was a three-peat, because if you three-peat, that's legendary. Like that is near dynasty status. But then 25 years without one, like we are going on 14, and I am suffering right now for the Red Wings. So I think by a hair, I have to go with the one every 8 years.
Okay, I'll be the devil's advocate for three-peat then. I mean, that puts you in illustrious company in terms of dynasties, right? Not winning for 25 years after, yeah, that's going to hurt, but you're going to remember those 3 back-to-back-to-backs. It would be legendary, that is for sure.
Yeah, but then you just turn into Leaf fans reminiscing about the great past.
Oh, that's more than twice as long as the 24 years.
Connor Murphy says, oh no, Mickey, Ken, and Trevor's flight got canceled and they can't call the game. Luckily, you 3 are at the game and Valley Sports asks you all to call it. Who is covering for who? Who's the play-by-play, the color commentator, and the guy who gives out the feel-good stories and background? Oh, that's interesting. Evan, look, buddy, I love you, but
I'm not doing play-by-play. Oh my God. There's too many marbles in my mouth at all times to be talking that long and that quickly.
Yeah, I don't know. Brett, I don't know if you, do you see yourself as more of a play-by-play guy or like the background, holy, like that kind of person?
1,000% I'd be the color guy, breaking down what just happened, saying dumb shit, and generally just commenting on whatever the hell's going on. Yeah, that's way more up my alley.
The thought of doing play-by-play next to you with you ribbing me the entire time is both hysterical and mortifying. And I know you would love the hell out of that. Yeah. Okay. Michael Rasmussen's offensive upside says recency bias due to the also, it should be said that those are 3 of the most consummate professionals in the industry, and it is not an easy task to do their jobs. So by no means do we think we could do that. Michael Rasmussen's offensive upside says recency bias due to the World Juniors, but are we all overlooking Sebrango as a guy to challenge for Detroit this year? Feels like he's a good sleeper pick to watch out for in camp and preseason. Among all the Edvinsson Johansson hype, I kind of forgot he's been in the AHL for 2 years already.
I don't think I'm probably as big of a Sebrango fan as there is out there, and I don't think he's there yet. He's got a mature game, but there's still parts of his skill that need to come along in order to be able to play at the NHL pace. So, It wouldn't be the craziest thing to ever happen, but I give it like a less than 5% shot.
There's just so many players in the way. It's not impossible, but there's so many players in the way. Babe Landeskog is a Stanley Cup champion, says sleeper team to do well, not necessarily win a championship in the NHL, AHL, and the next World Juniors. AHL is a crapshoot, so I won't even try that. World Juniors, next World Juniors, Latvia. Why not?
Slovakia. And
in
then
the
for the NHL,
Minnesota.
Minnesota. I don't know. I don't think they're a sleeper. They kind of have to do well, don't they?
No, I guess.
Seattle.
Maybe. Yeah, Seattle. Oh my God.
Jeremy Dahl says, why are the Detroit Red Wings the best team to be following in hockey? Overall, the most storied history of any American team. I think the most storied history over the last 30 years, or at least up there in terms of not even just success, but legendary players who have come through, storylines with the Russian Five. If you think of who is one of the most skilled players of all time, Pavel Datsyuk came through there. You think who was the best defenseman since Bobby Orr? It's Nicholas Lidstrom. It's who was the guy putting up points that wasn't Gretzky or Lemieux? That was Steve Yzerman. The Red Wings have no shortage of history and winners. And for future, Mo Seider, Lucas Raymond. Simple as.
We have the best jerseys. We're the only team to throw octopus on the ice, and we have Mickey Redmond. I don't need anything other than that.
Yeah, having Ken and Mick on the call definitely makes it a lot easier. Okay, we have time for some Reddit questions, which we haven't done in a while. This one from Welcome to the Snip Show says, if the Wings are in playoff contention by mid-season or trade deadline, what are the odds of a trade for a rental player like Patrick Kane, and how much would it cost? Thanks. Kane would probably be too pricey in my mind, and I think if the Red Wings are in contention, it wouldn't be insane, but I think Steve Yzerman's approach to this has been very measured in saying, like, he's not going to sell the farm or mortgage futures and, sacrifice future success when the Red Wings aren't necessarily a contender. So, I'm not going to sit here and call it impossible, but I think the price for a world-class trade deadline acquisition, which is what Patrick Kane would probably be, that would probably be more than the Red Wings would be willing to give up, in my mind.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that you have to be a true contender to start swinging the big hammer at trade deadline. If they want to give up a 6th-round piece to get a depth guy to maybe solidify a hole so they don't get embarrassed in the first round, sure. But yeah, you have to be one of the top 5-6 teams in the league to even think about doing that.
All right. This is an old one. This one's from my good friend OSBP. Says, serious throwback topic. The other day, my wife texts me and says, do you sit or stand to wipe? I reply, I'm a stander. I know I'm wrong and never thought we'd have to have this conversation. I expected her to be a sitter, obviously, and she said I had no idea people sat and wiped. This should be added to the Winged Wheel podcast wiki history for off-season content dating back 6 years. That is ancient days Winged Wheel podcast. Wow. That is going back a long, long ways. And that's probably a good spot here to wrap up this episode. Thank you all for tuning in, and thank you for bearing with us being unexpectedly remote. I know it's kind of a hassle when we switch back and forth, but we'll be in the studio for next episode. We'd like to thank all of our listeners, the sponsors of this podcast episode, NordVPN. Be sure to check out the link that is mentioned. It's also in the bio and pinned in a comment. And all of our Patreon supporters, especially our name level sponsors. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, the Stay Fresh Cheese Bag, Nick Perks, Nicholas Brodeen, Matthew M. Rice, Ben Hurd, Brandon M., Carl Brutanen Nanoluski, Chimmy, Chris P., Citizen High Five, Connor Scovey, Coyote Season Tickets in Tempe with that insane jersey, Craig Kibble, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, Give Blood, Fight Probert, Greach, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Kalen Wood, King Tone, Kyle Hashman, Marcus, Matt McKay, Nedeljkovic, goalie number 1, Nicholas Fritz, R.A., Ryan Hanna, Ryan Hubbard, Scott Martin, The Life Aquatic with Steve Comfer, Zachary Rogers, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, Antonio Gracias, Babe Landeskog is the Stanley Cup champion, Ben Barron, Bertuzzi and Hronik trade proposal number 69, Brian Vasha, Connor Leighton, Darren Fick, Dave W., Evans adult film star alter ego Kevin Lovesaber, Evans neglected parking garage, Evans bingo card, Griffey Boy, James Laporte, Jeremiah Dobo, JM Rhapsody, John Evans, Josh Yelton, Justin and the Angry Mob, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Logan Burgos, Madison Bowie, Matt S., Max Emilian, Melissa Erickson, Papa Woody, Puck Norris, Reed, Ravi DeLuca, Ryan Hanna, the Prophecy Lobsinger Hot Tub episode, Thick Rick, Trevor Pevivar. Thank you all so very much. Patrons, we'll talk to you midweek for the Patreon exclusive episode.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockey Town Evan.